we already saw that Francisco Suarez talks about how it would be wrong for the Pope, or could be wrong for a Pope, to lay down an order contrary to right customs, or to try to overturn the ecclesiastical ceremonies resting on apostolic tradition. This is an important expression. The ceremonies resting on apostolic tradition. He's not making some kind of claim, which in fact would be impossible to verify, that the Pope can only not change exactly what the apostles gave us in the sacraments, because we don't even know what exactly the apostles determined. We know that there are 7 sacraments instituted by Christ. The Council of Trent says that's de fide. And we know that these sacraments have always been celebrated in the church. But what Suarez is talking about is the entire organically developed tradition, the ecclesiastical ceremonies resting on apostolic tradition. He's not making some kind of ridiculous substance, accident, essential, inessential distinction. He doesn't make that distinction because you can't make that distinction, at least as far as understanding the liturgy itself. The liturgy is all of a piece. It develops as a holistic thing in which the sacraments are bestowed, although there are also non-sacramental liturgies like the Divine Office. And there are things that are essential and inessential to the effectuation of a valid sacrament, for sure. That's where the substance, accident, and the essential, inessential distinctions are valid. So if you want to know, like, did baptism occur? Yes or no? Did consecration happen? Yes or no? Those are yes or no questions. But if you want to talk about what is the Eucharistic liturgy, it's not just the consecration, and nobody has ever treated it that way before. It's all of the ecclesiastical ceremonies that have appropriately adorned and grown up around this great mystery of the Eucharist, and which the church has always lovingly received and defended, right? The church has never had this reductionistic, minimalistic attitude that just reduces everything to a valid sacrament. This is what I call in vitro transubstantiation, right? It's like trying to isolate procreation from unity. You can't do this. This is completely antithetical to any traditional orthodox right worship, right doctrine way of thinking, okay? So I'm just making that point because it's ridiculous what some of the papalist apologists out there try to do. I mean, if they were to be believed, then the church for most of its history and the attitude of 99.9% of Catholics throughout history would have been simply wrong, right? That is to say, the attitude of loving and cherishing and holding fast to and defending all the ecclesiastical ceremonies of the church, right? That would have been useless, unnecessary. Why were they doing that? The papal oath that's given in the Liber Diurnus Romanorum Pontificum, the Pope there swears to uphold the rites and ceremonies of the church exactly, in their exactitude. The Council of Constance's papal oath says the same thing when it's proposing, here's what a pope should do. Here's the sort of job description of a pope. And that was from part of the Council of Constance that was accepted, not part that was rejected. And especially I want to point to the profession of faith of the Council of Trent, which says, I adhere to the received and approved ceremonies of Holy Mother Church, right? Obviously referring at that time to not just to the Tridentine rite, as some people might call it, but to the entire organically developed Roman tradition, right? Over all the centuries of its development. There's never a point of fundamental rupture in that entire tradition, right? So look, it's clear, I think it's clear from the tradition that the liturgical rites of the church have a certain precedence over the Pope. He is not the master and possessor of the liturgical rites of the church, the way that, say, Descartes and Bacon wanted man to be a master and possessor of nature through technology, right? And to enslave it and to make nature deliver, what we want from it. That's not the attitude that the Pope should have towards the liturgy. Rather, he has an attitude of one who receives the liturgical rites from tradition and who venerates them, who loves them, who augments them, who, if necessary, right, who could purify some error that crept in, as the popes sometimes did. They made very minor modifications over the centuries in order to correct errors that had crept in. there was a pope, for example, who saw that the missal was being filled with the wrong Latin translation, that people were replacing the old Latin translation that had been there for eons with the new newer version of the Vulgate. And he said, no, this is against tradition. We can't do that, right?
I wanted to make mention of the New Catechism, even the New Catechism, paragraph 1125, which I think is very telling what it says here. It says, no sacramental rite may be modified or manipulated by the will of the minister of the community. So it's juxtaposing this, the individual priest, and what the priest does with the Mass or the sacraments, juxtaposing that then with the Pope, because the next sentence says this: even the supreme authority in the church may not, and that the Latin is non potest, cannot, not possible, change the liturgy arbitrarily, but only in the obedience of faith and with religious respect for the mystery of the liturgy.
Yeah. Now, it's unfortunate. Well, as many have pointed out, right, that passage is like straight Ratzinger. So whether he had a hand in writing it or whether somebody else wrote it under his influence, it's straight Ratzinger. And he says the same thing in a number of speeches. This is a big theme in his work, as we all know. The unfortunate thing is that the horse has already bolted by the time that paragraph of the Catechism, because exactly what's described there has already occurred, and there's no honest inquiry anymore that can deny that religious respect for the liturgy was missing, was lacking, was sorely lacking from what the Concilium did, the Bugnini-led super committee after Sacrosanctum Concilium did to the Roman Rite. And that's why even moderate figures like Ratzinger, right, who's not a traditionalist, right, but even moderate figures have protested and have complained about what was done and have even called it a devastation. I mean, that's the word Ratzinger used. And he says, we wept before the ruins of what we loved, namely in the liturgical movement, right? I mean, this is not the realm of sort of wild-eyed, Rasputin-esque traditionalists or something. I mean, this is like mainstream thinking at this point, right? And let me just emphasize another thing that's connected here, right? We are supposed to be, we as Catholics, as Orthodox Christians, because I want to include the East as well, as any kind of Orthodox Christian that inherits sacraments and liturgy, we are supposed to be profoundly formed by the liturgical rites. They are the lex orandi, the lex credendi, the lex vivendi. So we are supposed to be profoundly formed by them. We're supposed to develop an attachment to what is true and good and beautiful and holy and right. And so this is why it's impossible to just drop at a moment's notice a liturgical rite in which one has learned to worship, or the doctrine that one has acquired from it. You can't do that. That's completely antithetical to a Catholic spirit, right? There's something similar with being formed by the doctrine of the popes themselves. If you were seriously formed by the teaching of John Paul II on marriage and family, you can't just drop it when Francis says the opposite, or when his picked theologians in Rome, like Chiodi, say the opposite, right? If you've been deeply formed by Ratzinger, Benedict XVI on the liturgy, you can't just simply drop it when the next pope says, oh, well, actually, that was fine for the 1990s or for 2007 or whatever, but that's not good enough anymore. That's whatever. No, you can't do that. Anybody who says you can drop the liturgy like that, or you can drop the teaching of a pope that's true and right, like John Paul II on marriage and family or Ratzinger on the liturgy, is somebody who actually has a fundamentally irrational conception of what it means to be Catholic. It means you have no content in your mind. You allow yourself to be formed by nothing in any definitive way, in any deep way. You have to be totally superficial, and you have to be like a weather vane that just tilts whichever way the Pope goes, right, is the way that you go. And that's the very definition of stupidity and ambition.